I think we just watched one of the best horror movies of the year, and it's not even out yet. Plus, I'm not sure that many people have either watched or even heard about it outside of certain film festivals. That's one of the great things about Montreal's Fantasia Film Festival. You can sometimes watch a small independent movie with a weird premise, and it can become one of your unexpected favorites. The Fantasia Film Festival is one of the biggest genre film festivals in the world. It's been going on strong for almost 30 years now. Early on, I remember I always associated the festival with films from Asia. After all, it was instrumental in the J-horror boom. It was the first festival in North America to feature a film by Takashi Miike. Its premiere of Ring in 1999 led to the film being acquired by DreamWorks for distribution as well as for the remake. It was also the place where Satoshi Kon's Perfect Blue was introduced internationally. And I could go on. Over the years, the festival has gotten bigger and featured more and more films from all over the world, but it's never lost its own very specific charm. Although fantasy, horror, and action films are usually at the forefront, Fantasia is a place where a lot of quirky, original, and experimental works are presented to one of the most uniquely engaged audiences out there. People line up for hours outside the theater, sometimes over a couple of blocks, all for a chance to cheer, laugh, scream, and weirdly enough, meow, once the lights go down. All this to say that this is where first-time directors can come to cut their teeth. And it's a place where you can continuously find hidden gems year after year. And sometimes see much talked about movies months before everyone else. This year, we weren't just watching movies as a traditional audience. It was our first time being part of the press, so we decided to put these press passes to good use. With over 100 feature-length films, there was no way we could have attended every screening. We managed to check out 12 in total. Some we liked, some surprised us, some were disappointing and frustrating, but as film lovers, there's always something to learn. So in today's video, we want to give you a general, spoiler-free overview of what we watched. So we'll be dividing the movies into 3 categories. The first is more on the negative side. 2 movies that might have looked shiny and interesting on the outside, but ended up disappointing us. Then the second category, 5 movies that have their pros and cons, but are just okay. Then at the end, our top 5 recommendations.
So let's start with the first disappointing movie, Cielo.
What drew me in at first was the cinematography on display in the trailer and the fact that it's a magical realism story set in Bolivia. When the film's director introduced the movie, he mentioned that he didn't like to make films for the brain, but rather for what they made us feel. And let's just say that his statement didn't really put me at ease. And unfortunately, as the movie went on, my suspicions were confirmed. Although the movie looked great and had some interesting ideas and some funny moments, the story of a little girl on a quest to find the heaven her mother yearned for felt too disjointed and unclear about its own mythology. It all begins with a child murdering her father, then her mother, then dragging her mother's corpse inside a sealed barrel, all within like 15 minutes. So I told myself, okay, we're following fairy tale rules. But then the body gets discovered, and the police gets involved, and it becomes this convoluted mess. Some people were really moved, which was weird. Although as a native speaker, I found that sometimes people overvalue Spanish language films just because they're from a different culture. What was most frustrating is that in choosing to watch Cielo, we missed out on watching another movie that we would have definitely enjoyed more. Now on to the next movie on the negative pile, Redux Redux. The 2 main factors involved in choosing to watch it were the writers and the description. A woman avenging her daughter by killing her murderer in different parallel realities. It started off really well. Within the first few minutes, the film was delivering on its very simple premise. It was interesting, it was exciting, it was violent, and then it became something else. We were introduced to an annoying character. The avenging mother suddenly wasn't the one we were following anymore. It was the annoying one. And as it went on, dumb choices kept being made by the protagonist and the creators over and over again, leaving something simple for something convoluted and unnecessary. To top it off, the dialogue felt superficial and angsty, like from one of those CW teen dramedies. Barring the noteworthy soundtrack, this was a very frustrating watch. Now for the following films, we'll be looking at those that find themselves somewhere in the middle. Those that might have had interesting ideas or premises, but weren't executed to their full potential. They weren't great, they weren't bad, they were just okay. The first one in this category is Sham. When I watched the trailer for Takashi Miike's retelling of the real-life story of a teacher that was falsely accused of bullying one of his students, I was worried that it would be too similar to Hirokazu Koreeda's Monster due to the film's description and the fact that we would be seeing events unfold from different character perspectives. As it turned out, it wasn't the case. Sham starts off with a perspective of the victim's family, the one about the cruel and abusive teacher. It's shocking and a bit too evil to be taken seriously, but it's also the story the Japanese public first learned of when the news broke. So we, the audience, are meant to feel the outrage that the public felt. We then see what happens from the teacher's point of view, and by extension, the truth, since it's structured in a way to show us that his perspective is a correct one. The movie does a good job at showing how someone could be judged and condemned by public opinion, even before the facts are known. But in the end, I wish there could have been more closure in regards to certain character motivations. And also, there were at least 2 to 3 moments where the movie could have ended. It was an okay movie, but sadly forgettable. Moving on from a movie that was based on a true story, to one whose story might become real if the world keeps going to shit. The School Duel. The movie's premise sounded like something out of the Hunger Games or Battle Royale, which is why it caught our attention. In the near future, due to school shootings being at an all-time high, the free state of Florida enacts a deadly competition where every year, a select group of kids basically kills each other under the pretense of doing it for their god and their country. In addition to the gun control discourse, you can throw in a bit of the dangers of social media use by young teenagers. On the one hand, it is important to bring attention to real-life problems and address them. But on the other hand, you're preaching to the choir here. The people that are going to be watching this movie probably already agree with the message that it's trying to hit you over the head with. I do have to give them props for how they used their budget and for how great the black and white looks. But ultimately, this just felt like an on-the-nose Twilight Zone episode. The next movie on our list is The Undertone. It's one of those smaller, first-time director feature-length films that show the seeds of great things to come. It's a minimalistic story about the co-host of a paranormal podcast who is dealing with her mother's terminal condition, just as her podcast receives anonymous recordings that contain strange noises and goings-on. Here's the thing. I like about 2 parts of this movie. The beginning that was well set up, and the ending that goes off the wall. I think those were the parts the filmmaker enjoyed making the most. And they were the most tied to the interesting side of the movie. A podcast listening to haunted recordings. It does a good job at building tension, revving up the spookiness level, considering we only see 2 characters on screen. It's a one-location slow burn that is humble in its presentation but doesn't feel cheap. And by the way, congrats to them on getting a deal with A24. For the next story on our list, we're staying within that creepy supernatural story realm, Dewey Shaw. What made it sound interesting was that it was described as a Bangladeshi anthology made up of 4 stories that dealt with folk horror. It's a part of the world we're not too familiar with, so of course we wanted to check them out. The 4 stories are self-contained and sometimes share a few themes. A group of people vandalize an altar and soon suffer the consequences for their sacrilege. A fortune teller reads his own palm, affecting his luck and that of the people around him. A woman is trapped in a marriage whose sinister origins keep control over her memories. In a village blessed with talent, a girl who can't sing on key turns to a witch to save her own life. Some stories are more effective than others, and you can even tell that some of the actors might not do this for a living, but overall, it was a welcome surprise. Now for the last movie in the middle category, we're going back to something closer to reality. $sign positions. Normally, I wouldn't be very interested in a movie about cryptocurrency, but this movie's reviews from previous festivals pushed us to want to watch it, and it didn't disappoint. It's about a well-intentioned man that becomes obsessed and addicted with investing in crypto, hoping to make a lot of money in order to help his family and stave off poverty. As the movie goes on, the protagonist digs deeper holes for himself. making the level of tension rise, kinda like watching Good Time. Just a cavalcade of questionable choices and things getting from bad to worse. The main character is actually likable, so you feel for him and for his predicaments. It had funny moments, cringy moments, disgusting moments, but it also had a lot of heart. And now we've reached the third portion of our list, the 5 movies we think you should check out if you have a chance. Reflet dans un diamant mort is one of the most original movies we watched this year, and it's not an easy one to describe. Think non-linear 70s James Bond type protagonist reminiscing about his experiences as a spy when he was younger, directed in a style similar to Edgar Wright, while paying homage to giallo and spy movie tropes, combined with some kind of psychedelic trip. Oh, and on top of that, most of the film is in French, with moments in Italian and one very funny scene in different languages. I gotta be honest, I didn't know much about the movie going in other than the fact that it was a spy story. I was initially confused because at first, it's hard to know when the story is in the past or in the present, but as it went on, you can deduce why it's that way. I was very impressed by the attention to detail. I can't imagine how hard it must have been to edit so many quick insert shots. It's a fun movie that has a high rewatchability factor. The next movie on our list is called F*** Toys. To be honest, the first thing that drew my attention to this movie was its title. At first I thought it was just some horny movie made for the sake of being edgy, but as we looked into it, we saw that it was well received at other festivals, and the trailer made it look funny and interesting. F*** Toys is a quest-type story in a very colorful, heightened, self-contained, and sex-positive world, where we follow the protagonist on her journey to break a curse that's been ruining her life as of late. There isn't much of a plot. We basically stumble on from one mishap to another along her path to get $1,000 and a lamb for the ritual that will rid her of said curse. It's a hilarious and absurd movie that is definitely not for the faint of heart. And as you could infer from the title of this movie, it ain't exactly rated PG. The main character is a sex worker after all, and there are a lot of, let's say, kinks on display. The audience had a lot of fun with this one. It felt like an even more experimental Anora if I can compare it to anything. If you're lucky enough to catch it at a festival, give them some support. It really is a shame that they haven't found distribution yet. But again, I remind you, this is not for everyone. Coming in at the midway point of our top 5 is Lurker. As a Montrealer, there's always a certain amount of pride that I feel when I see Québécois actors and directors getting bigger roles and projects in the film industry. And such is the case for Théodore Pellerin, the lead actor in Lurker. A quote-unquote fan works his way into an up-and-coming musician's life and becomes part of his crew. In reality, calling him a fan would be perceived as an insult by the character, because he doesn't see himself as something as banal or common as a fan. When introducing the film, the actor asked the crowd not to hate him. And after watching it, I can understand why. His character is a sociopath that kinda reminded me of Jake Gyllenhaal in Nightcrawler. He's not in it for romance. He uses the fame he acquires for his own purposes. He is driven, calculating, and obsessed with making himself indispensable within the musician's circle, even if it means making everyone else's life a living hell. It's a tense watch that will leave you wanting more. Our number 2 pick this year is Together. This is a movie we had on our list from the moment we heard about it. A newly engaged couple moves into a new house. One day, as they're stranded in the woods, they're forced to spend the night underground. As of the next morning, they notice that their bodies are attracted to each other in the way that magnets are when in close proximity. This leads to sometimes funny or gruesome moments when their flesh becomes physically intertwined against their will. Although this is a horror movie, and until now one of the better ones we've watched this year, it did have a lot of comedic moments peppered throughout the film. It's a metaphor about the highs and lows of a couple's life seen through the lens of body horror in the style of Cronenberg, John Carpenter's The Thing, and The Substance. Even if it's filled with grotesque imagery, there might be a moment where you recognize some of the relationship's deformities in your own. It Ends is our favorite Fantasia 2025 movie, and it was also the first one we watched, so it really set the bar high for the rest of them. It's a very simple premise that could have easily become boring or gone wrong in so many ways. 4 friends find themselves obligated to stay in their car as they drive along an unending road. If they stop, within a minute and a half, people from the surrounding woods come running to steal the car, so they keep going. I like that even before the weirdness started, the 4 actors really felt like a group of friends just having dumb conversations and sometimes veering into deeper subjects. They verbalize many hypotheses that the audience might be having at the same time, and even come up with their own ways to cope with such a unique situation. Even though this was all basically in one location and very dialogue-driven, it kept me engaged and wondering what would happen next. It's well directed, well acted, and also has a very good score. This is the type of movie that keeps you thinking about it once it's over, because there are moments where you might identify with one of the characters, and later you might dislike the same character. The horror involved in this movie doesn't come from a murderer or a monster or a demon, but from the existential dread the characters are living, and by extension, what aspects of it we might relate to. As the director jokingly said when he introduced the movie, this one is for anyone who's had to grow up. I hope that we've managed to pique your interest for at least a couple of these movies. Please let us know down in the comments if there's any one of these that you've watched, or if there's any one of these that you might be interested in. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you haven't done so yet. Until next time.